Alright guys, welcome back to VALORANT News. As Sentinels cruise their way through the group stages at the Africa TV League tournament to get through to the playoffs emphatically indeed, FNS has revealed exactly why they're looking so good so far and have frankly dominated this tournament up to this point, giving a lot of credit to the in-game leading and to the coaching staff at Sentinels that really understand the meta and the way to play VALORANT right now that few other teams actually do. Very much enjoyed to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I greatly appreciate it. The Game Awards of course go down last night, which from an esports perspective is kind of, you know, it's not considered in quite as high a regard as maybe the esports awards themselves are, but still they do similar type of awards. Potter, of course, won esports coach of the year. Loads of awards really going the way of Valorant or just Riot Games in general. League of Legends, Faker, you know, Potter. Valorant, of course, won Game of the Year as well. Stuff like this, similar to what we saw the other day. Now, the World Champions of Valorant, though, it ain't looking so good. So Com says, champions curse. We've seen this for the last couple of years. Ascends they won in 2021. They stuck it out. They fell off. They were kind of mid. 2022, Loud won it then. All of a sudden, they've lost a couple of their players. They go to Sentinels and don't have as good of a second season. EG win champions, and it's gone, you know, this time it's got even worse, right? The entire organization is collapsing. The team is collapsing. Their players are going everywhere. We don't really know what's going on with Com or with Jorgama or where these guys are going to end up even as it stands. So Com's kind of implication is that either EG are gone or he's gone or something, because we saw the other day that one of their Game Changers players said expect the expected and the next day they were dropped. So I don't know what EG are going to announce here, but there have been, of course, rumours that Riot Games are not so happy, and I think for good reason, with Evil Geniuses, and potentially considering what the future might be there of that relationship, if there even is one going forward. So hoping the best for that side of things, but also you got to wonder, where are those guys going to go? Is Com going to be off EG? Are they going for an entirely new roster? Are they even going to still be around in next year's VCT? Like, there's still a couple of months for them to figure that all out behind the scenes. And then NRG have to confirm what they're up to. We know full well that it's going to be Crashies, Marved, and you know, Victor, of course, with Ched as the coach. And Ched even says, I would do it again with, you know, Marved involved and everything like this. So with any luck, that's going to be confirmed soon enough. We still think it's Ethan Demon 1, but to be honest, we haven't seen massive updates on that over the last few days because we've had plenty else going on, especially at this tournament, the Africa TV League event. So yesterday, just after yesterday's video was gone live, we then had the classic match that always seems to happen, PRX versus DRX. But this, of course, was the decider for who gets into the bracket play and who goes home immediately. Now, look, if you had to predict this series, DRX, they love a good 5th, 6th place. And PRX love making it all to finals or top 3 or whatever the case is. So probably easy enough to predict. But PRX kind of smoked them this series. Game 1 of the Lotus was actually very competitive until the end of the second half. Like, this felt like it was a close game. It was 7-7, and then PRX just pulled away on the second side on one of those attacking rounds in a row. The breeze, though, was another level. Like, this is the thing with DRX. They keep sticking out with their roster, and you totally understand why. But when they tend to play a team like PRX, of course, PRX have kind of, okay, in this series, they just kept their same roster with no Jing. But even when they're mixing things up and doing typical PRX things, they still just smoked DRX really here, especially the map 2. Forsaken, I think, had 5 Yoru ults in the first half alone, which is just so ridiculous. And he was 23 and 13 in the end here on the Yoru. So, I mean, they got completely wiped off the face of the earth here, really, DRX. They kept it respectable in the second half, I guess 13-6, but this wasn't particularly competitive. So DRX, Buzz tried his best as always, had one particular ridiculous moment, but in the end it was overshadowed by PRX just putting them to bed. So DRX gone, another 5th, 6th place for them at this tournament. Definitely is going to raise some questions, right, about what to expect in that team going into next season. At the end of the day, Sentinels, PRX, and DRX all in one group. Only 2 of them could ever make it out anyway. And I think my prediction going in was PRX and Sentinels, which eventually did come true. But that doesn't necessarily mean that DRX are so bad. But it's just the manner of the defeats, you know, like it wasn't particularly close between them and Sentinels. I mean, it was a 2-0, and the same story here against PRX, and this was even more emphatic. So definitely raising some questions about that team. The other very interesting team, though, yesterday was T1. Of course, we saw they got the victory against Edward Gaming, and then yesterday they had to play a decider game to see if they would get in easily, as Sentinels did, all the way through to the playoffs themselves. And we'll see the results of that here in just a second. So, you know, of course, Carpe doing the in-game leading on this roster at the moment, and this match, Team Liquid versus T1, was pretty wild. Goes all the way to a map 3, and T1 at this point are down 9-7, and Carpe is a funny player, right, because sometimes he makes plays you think, what is he doing? And then other times you see players like this, where he pops a Sheriff Ace to bring his team back into the game, and 9-8 at this point. Remarkable round. There were so many aces in this series. I mean, there were, what, 6 aces, I think, across 3 maps of this series. And there was another one here from Rossy. And this caused a lot of talk, actually, among especially North American, tier 2 scene, shall we say, on just how strong that region is. I think we've known that the Americas has a lot of talent in, but especially in Valorant right now, it's incredibly impressive what's been able to be accomplished by these players that were kind of milling around in NA Tier 2 and maybe not making the next step. They've been brought up to a team like T1, for example, and here's Rossy popping an ace to, what was this, to tie up the game? Or, okay, no, it was 9-9 at this point. So this was to take them to 10-9 in front. Carb here had an ace a couple of rounds before. Then they take it a 10-9 advantage here on the ascent. They eventually close out the series. So 2-1 for T1 over Team Liquid. And, I mean, Yampy had a monster series here, plus 25, 76 frags, but it wasn't enough. And Rossy on the Viper, plus 24. So, as we say, he had a monster game on the ascent here to close out the series. Yampy dropped 30 for the loss, unfortunately. It was 13-10. Breeze also went T1's way. Map 1 was 16-14, a crazy overtime. So an X-Squirt here on the chamber. So what a crazy team, right? I mean, this T1 roster was controversial for sure. Picking up X-Squirt I was a big fan of, but picking up Rossy was really, it was just strange, like getting Rossy into this team didn't seem to make much sense. But clearly a masterclass here from T1, bringing Rossy in. Looks like an absolute superstar so far in this unit, and they've made very impressive progression against a team like Team Liquid. And a lot of the reaction, and very good reason here, is like, well, obviously Rossy says, thank God for allowing me to be here, truly blessed to play on these stages with these teammates. And as the likes of Koala Noob say, and even Zekin, I hope people see that tier 2 NA talent is real and legit after stuff like this. M80 beats half a franchising, Zekin says. So, when Rossy's going over to APAC and playing in teams like T1, having these type of results, just goes to show there's lots of other talent that could potentially do a similar thing. And of course, great to see for Rossy himself. So T1 advance through to the next round, and they will play PRX, which is the most exciting thing that could have really possibly happened this tournament, because even before the season began, you guys probably remember, X-Squid, of course, is Forsaken's brother. And when Jing was going to have to step away from PRX, there were rumors for some time, actually, that X-Squid could come into PRX as his replacements. They've got Monyet instead, but T1 have got X-Squid, and they're now going to face off against each other. So the inaugural kind of Brotherhood derby is coming up very shortly indeed. Now, we've also got to mention this series. I'll just hit the refresh yet again. Edward versus Fancy United Esports. Now, game 1, actually, I mean, look at this. The first half was, 8-2 in Fancy United Esports' favour, but then EDG came back with 10 rounds in a row, eventually closed out the map 13-10, and then they're winning the split at the moment. So, assuming they close out this series, they would then move on to play Team Liquid in the Deciders. That's basically coming up this morning. So we've got Edward versus Fancy United. Winner of that then plays Team Liquid, and then the winner of that then qualifies to play Sentinels, because the way the bracket is looking in a second, it's going to be Sentinels versus the winner of this series, and it's going to be PRX versus T1, as we have just mentioned. But speaking of Sentinels, they right now find themselves as they've got to be tournament favourites, right? Whatever team got out of the group with PRX and DRX in was, I think, naturally going to be favourites for the tournament, and that's exactly where we currently find ourselves. It's kind of a wild one for Sentinels, really, because all the talk has been for the last quite some time, content team, all this stuff, and when we heard rumours that shortly after the World Championship, or even during the World Championship, they weren't even there, but they were scrimming teams and doing really well, and it was like, well, as soon as we heard those rumours, how legit were they? Are Sentinels actually going to be good this season? Who was IGLing? Was it FNS? Was it Gen.G? Turned out it was Gen.G. Zelsis, of course, in every series they win, Pancada's probably thinking, oh, come on, guys, you can't be serious. I could be doing this in the team as well. But FNS gives his thoughts on this because, he's obviously watched a lot of their games, understands a fair bit about how to play Valorant and FPS games in general on a very high level, and just says that the way they're approaching the game right now is very commendable and isn't necessarily what they might have done previously. I think really what FNS says, a lot of the credit has to be ascribed to this to the in-game leading of Gen.G, also the coaching staff over there, Drew Spark and Kaplan, and these guys putting in the work, because obviously they've got the talent, Sentinels, no doubt, but the question has been putting that together, making it work for the different agents, making the meta shifts required, and also just not making mistakes, really. That's what it comes down to a lot of the time, not throwing away rounds you should be winning, and that's what Sentinel's doing a great job at the moment, and it's something that, has plagued them in the past.
Sentinels has never looked as good as they look right now tactically. And in terms of players being in form, besides their Iceland run, tactically alone, Sentinels is completely with the meta. They understand rotations. All the players know what they're doing and what their role is, and no one's really overheating. in really strong situations or like really important situations, which makes the team really, really, really strong. Like they actually look like a good unit overall. There are so many examples that if I rewatch this game, I could show you guys where they could easily overheat. And the players choose to play retake. In terms of hitting bomb sites, map control, not dying when you're up numbers, holding, knowing when to hold, when to actually get aggressive. All the players know and are on the same page.
Even stuff like this that Drew Spark pointed out, I thought was kind of cool in alignment with what FNS is saying, that it's an adaptation. When Tender's making those TP plays with the Omen, you can't necessarily get away with that with Omen typically for playmaking. But when you're playing on LAN with, as Drew Spark says, with very loud white noise. So when the players are playing, usually they've got their headsets on, they can hear the game sound, they can hear their teammates, but in order to block out the crowd, they'll also play white noise through the headsets just so they can't hear anything that's going on, they can't hear the crowd giving things away. That's the idea. At this event, apparently that's really loud compared to what it might usually be. So they know that players on the other team don't get the sound cues that they might usually get. So an adaptation to that is you can use Omen for these type of playmaking things, which is why you're seeing other teams do this. But it's interesting because I think Sentinels of old might not have noticed this or might not have adapted to this properly and would have just kind of played their game. But by Sentinels adapting to it in this way, getting tens on the Omen to make those entry playmaking plays, which he likes to do, is working here, as it might not work at another event or might not work on LAN. But that level of adaptation is something that I think has impressed many and definitely is important to Sentinel's success as it stands. So as we see, in the playoffs, it will be like this. T1 versus PRX tomorrow, and then shortly before that, Sentinels versus the Group B runner-up, which of course is going to be either Edward Gaming, Fancy United Esports if they make the comeback, or Team Liquid, who are probably the favourites really going into that series. I will also just mention quickly that Zellsis is maybe struggling a little bit with his health, as he says. 5 of 8 days he's been here, he's had nightmares, overheated room, tried to open the window so it cools down, inside a body becomes hot, cold skin, threw up several times, laying in the tub. So, doesn't seem Zellsis is particularly well. Whatever's wrong with him, wishing Zellsis the best. But you do have to wonder, because if Zellsis is fine for tomorrow's game, then cool, they can play with their intended team. But if Zellsis isn't fine, then all of a sudden they might have to put Pancada back in their team, which would be very interesting if they were to have to make that substitution mid-series, or mid-tournament, I suppose. So hopefully Zellsis is good, because I want to see how this team does as this team of 5 from now to the end of the tournament. But if Pancada has to step in, that would also be quite the opportunity for him. So yeah, it's been a long time for fans of Sentinels since they have seen anything quite like this. I mean, really since the Iceland days, as FNS mentions, was when they last won this many series in a row. And we now have another example continuing, at least for the time being. And just to mention the inaugural Sasanto derby, really, between the two brothers, forsaking the younger brother, execute the older brother, is coming up tomorrow in the playoffs for the Africa TV Valorant League. So hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.